Hey there, my radiant souls, and welcome to The Legacy in Your Genes: How Trauma Rewrites Your DNA and What It Means for Generational Curses. You know that this generational curses is really near and dear to my heart after my daughter brought it up thinking maybe we had all been cursed by witchcraft. But it's not a joke. Do you ever feel like you're carrying baggage that you didn't pack? Maybe it's that crushing anxiety that seems to come from out of nowhere, or a gnawing fear of scarcity despite being financially stable. So, if you've ever wondered why you're fighting battles that don't feel like yours, buckle up, Buttercup. Science is uncovering something both mind blowing and deeply validating. Trauma can alter DNA, and these changes can be passed down through generations. Yep, grandma's unresolved heartache might just be chilling in your genetic code. So, let's dive into the science, the stories, and most importantly, what you can do about it. Spoiler alert, it is not hopeless. It doesn't just leave emotional scars, it leaves molecular ones too. Enter the field of epigenetics, which studies how external factors can change the ways genes express themselves without altering the underlying DNA sequence. You can kind of think of it like the software updates on your phone. The hardware stays the same, but the way it operates shifts dramatically when it updates. Research actually suggests that stress and trauma can trigger epigenetic changes, particularly in the methylation process. Methylation sort of acts like a dimmer switch. It turns gene activity up or down. For example, trauma might silence genes that are responsible for stress regulations, which leaves you hyperreactive to the slightest hint of danger, even if that danger is just your toddler shouting, "Mom, Mom," for the 300th time today. They've actually done studies on this. The proof is in that petri dish, girl. They've studied Holocaust survivors. In a 2016 study published in Biological Psychiatry, it was revealed that children of Holocaust survivors exhibited epigenetic changes in genes related to cortisol regulation, which is the stress hormone. In short, their DNA was primed for high alert even though they had not actually been through the Holocaust. They were the children of the survivors who had been through it, who went through that trauma, and that was passed on down to their offspring. Another study, the Dutch hunger winter, babies that were born to mothers who endured famine during World War II showed altered methylation in genes related to metabolism, which increased their risk of obesity and diabetes decades later. Again, these babies were not even present during this famine, but they still had altered genes which affected their risk for obesity and diabetes. There have also been intergenerational animal studies, lab experiments on mice who are exposed to trauma. These have shown that their offspring inherit heightened stress responses even if the offspring themselves never experience trauma. And they say mice have it easy, right? Even they have trauma. These findings suggest that trauma's echoes can ripple across generations, impacting health, behavior, and even emotional resilience. Crazy, right? So let's talk about these generational curses, like what my daughter asked me about. Sort of the what's science and what's myth part of this. Before you call Aunt Bertha and yell at her for passing down the curse of anxiety, let's clarify just a few things. First, it is not literal voodoo. When people talk about generational curses, they often mean patterns of behavior, trauma, or health issues that seem to haunt a family. Science backs up the idea that trauma can leave a biological imprint, but it's not magic, it's molecules. Second, it's not all bad. Trauma related epigenetic changes can also enhance survival instincts. For example, communities that have endured oppression may exhibit a collective resilience that's just as inheritable as their stress responses, and that's a good thing. Finally, it's not permanent. Here's the kicker: epigenetic changes can be reversed. Just like software updates, you can debug the system. Healing is possible. So, how do you know if you're wrestling with inherited trauma or just navigating life's regular chaos? Well, here's a few clues. First, look for patterns of dysfunction. Look for recurring issues across generations, issues like addiction, financial instability, broken relationships, or chronic illness. These might hint at unresolved trauma. If 3 generations of your family have an uncanny ability to implode at Thanksgiving, for instance, that's worth a closer look. Second, look for unexplainable fears or behaviors. I mean, do you have an irrational fear of water even though you've never had a near drowning experience? Or maybe you avoid confrontation like the plague, even when standing your ground is necessary. These could all be echoes of your ancestors' experiences. And finally, look at cultural or historical context. Consider your family's history. Were they refugees? Were they enslaved? Or were they survivors of war? Did they endure systemic discrimination or economic hardship? You see, trauma does not exist in a vacuum. Context is key. Good news here is that you're not doomed to repeat history. Here's some ways that you can start untangling those ancestral knots. First, be sure to educate yourself. Remember, knowledge is power, and in this case, it's also liberation. Dive into books like It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin or The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. These are gold mines for understanding how trauma embeds itself and how to heal it. Another book that I really, really liked that first got me thinking about this is Break the Cycle, A Guide to Healing Intergenerational Trauma by Dr. Marielle Bouquet. You could also explore your family tree. Get curious about your lineage. Ask your relatives about their stories, about any hardships they've had, and any triumphs. Even uncovering small details can provide huge insights into patterns you might be perpetuating unconsciously. Third, remember therapy is your friend. Trauma informed therapy, like seek a therapist specializing in trauma, or EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. EMDR has been shown to help reprocess trauma and reduce its impact, even when it's not trauma that you have personally experienced. Remember, we're talking about your genes being altered by somebody else's trauma, so it can still benefit from EMDR. Family constellation therapy is another really good therapy. It's a lesser known approach, but it explores how family dynamics and inherited trauma can affect you. Number 4, mind body practices. Trauma lives in your body, not just in your mind. Incorporate practices that help release stored tension. Yoga is a great one. Focus on restorative or trauma sensitive yoga. Breath work is another magical technique. Any techniques like diaphragmatic breathing can calm the nervous system. And mindfulness. Meditation helps break the loop of generational stress response, which will in turn help you to heal. Next, rewrite the narrative. Consciously choose a different story. For example, if scarcity was the narrative in your family, start practicing gratitude and abundance. Create rituals or affirmations that symbolize breaking free from old patterns. And finally, heal through connection. Keep in mind that community matters. Connect with groups that understand your experience, whether it's a cultural community or a trauma-focused support group, and pass it forward. As you heal, share your journey. Breaking generational cycles is not just personal, it is revolutionary, and it will help any descendants that you have in your family as well. You're going to need compassion for this whole thing. Don't let me kid you. Healing generational trauma is no small feat. There are going to be days when it feels like slogging through mud with a 50-pound backpack, at least. Be kind to yourself. Celebrate your small victories, like setting boundaries or choosing a healthy coping mechanism over an old destructive one. Remember, you're not just healing for yourself, but for generations before and after you. The idea that trauma can leave a genetic imprint might feel heavy, but it's also profoundly empowering. You're not just a passive carrier of your ancestors' wounds, you are a co-creator of a new legacy. By understanding the science, uncovering your family's patterns, and taking active steps to heal, you are essentially rewriting your DNA story. So here's the breaking curses and building blessings. Your ancestors survived and thrived, so you could be here today, and now it's your turn to do the work. Not just for you, but for all the future souls in your family tree. It's hard, it's messy, but it's oh so worth it. Because if there's one thing trauma teaches us, it's that resilience also runs in families. So be the one to break the cycle.